All right, let's get going. So thanks, Jenny. Thanks for the intro. I'm really excited to be here talking to all of you today. And man, in a virtual world, conferences look different, but I'm so glad that we've got leaders like Jenny that are still pushing forward and doing virtual conferences and still trying to get us together to learn and share our experiences. So like Jenny said, we're going to talk today about the UW Health journey from kind of what I'd call data, undisciplined data practices to disciplined data practices. And we're really just talking about how the process we've gone through to clean house, to look at what we're doing and fix it, and so that we can move forward and do more interesting, exciting data-driven things. So real quick, we'll talk about who UW Health is. We're a $4 billion nonprofit health system. That's not that big, actually. We're probably mid-size, I'd guess, for a national health system. We have 5 hospitals, 600,000 patients served annually, give or take. Currently, we're at about 21,000 staff, just under 2,000 physicians. So make no mistake, it's big, and we are very big, and marketing for an organization this size is challenging. But we're about middle of the road for how this health systems go. And my team is really fun. I kind of have a dream job because I get to have my own team of web engineers. I've got software developers that report to me that go build awesome things and help build the technical foundation for digital experiences. I've got a DevOps team that helps make sure all the plumbing's hooked up and that traffic is flowing smoothly and our servers are up and running. I've got a QA engineer who does quality on all our stuff and is really vital to our team to make sure that we're pushing out good experiences for our patients. And then provider data reporting, and that person really owns the data for those physicians I mentioned on the last slide. My team powers the Find a Doctor tool, both the patient-facing side for people coming to look for a doctor, and also the underlying database that we use for a lot of reporting out to insurance companies and other things like that. So that's my team. We do report up through the CMO in the marketing team at UW Health. So we're kind of like this quasi IT team within marketing. But I don't like to call it IT. It's not IT, it's marketing technology. So we're going to break this presentation up into 2 parts. I want to just spend some time talking through the pain, talking through where we've been. And I've been with UW Health for 7 years. So a lot of what we're talking through is what I've experienced since joining and kind of the build up to kind of what I call the breaking point where we realized we really need to make some changes. So to start the story of pain, we need to talk about websites. We have a lot of them. And as to why we have a lot of them, I could go on and on, but there's some definite cases where you need to have separate domains and separate sites for different audiences, absolutely. And sometimes we built new microsites simply because it was easier than retrofitting our old behemoth flagship site, which is being redesigned at this very moment. But regardless of the why, when you have many websites, it creates some challenges. You have a lot of data, and specifically, if we want to talk about Google Analytics, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today, Google Analytics is really set up to track your websites any way you want to, but once you architect it that way, you're kind of stuck. And we, for better or worse, chose to set up separate individual profiles for each of our websites so that we could get kind of an unadulterated view of the data for that single domain. What that means is that if a user spends time on many of our websites, we don't really get that visibility. We have to go look at them one by one, and it's very hard to connect the dots to even see any type of information across them. So, this idea of tracking users across sites, I wouldn't say it's foreign, but it's not something we ever really were looking to do. We could kind of deduce whether or not someone had started on one website and ended up on another, but let's just be honest, it really wasn't meaningful, and it was not a worthwhile task because of just the time it took to sift through all of this messy data. So, some of our websites are very much tied together at the hip. Some of the ones you're looking at here are ones that a patient may use all in the same day. So they may come to www.uwhealth.org and find a doctor, and then they may end up at MyChart to schedule an appointment. Then they may want to read about some COVID guidelines, and now they're on our COVID microsite. And lastly, believe it or not, a lot of our patients end up working for us as staff, and so they end up on our careers portal searching for jobs. So all of these websites, they're capturing the same audience much of the time. That's not always true, but when it is true, we have no visibility into these user journeys. So that's pain point number one. Lots of websites, lots of Google Analytics profiles, no way to track the data between them. And I guess speaking of Google Analytics, if you've spent any time in there, if you've ever set up a website to try and optimize the data that you're capturing, you've probably worked with events. Event tracking is a really powerful way to use GA. It is probably maybe the most powerful way, in my opinion, because you really want to know what people are doing on your site. And the traditional metrics of page views and things like that, they only get you so far. Well, we have never had a disciplined approach to tracking events. To put it into perspective, in 1 month, last month, September of this year, and this is our old Google Analytics profile for our biggest website, uwhealth.org, we had 3.7 million events. Now imagine you're a marketer and you're trying to get some insight on those events. I can tell you that the way we had built it previously was not optimized for any type of reporting at all. We literally said, capture as much data as you can and cram it into Google Analytics, and then we'll go back and look at it someday and do something with it. And that's literally what we did. And we have ended up with a mountain of data that we don't really even use, if I'm honest. There's certain data points in there for sure that we do look at maybe on an annual basis to do some reporting about how many patients sent a greeting card online. I mean, it's very, very minute how much we use this data. And it's frustrating when you actually go in to find something because of the mountain of data you have to sift through. So again, just to summarize, we've got a bunch of websites, we've got a bunch of Google Analytics profiles, and we're tracking millions of events with no real strategy behind why we're tracking those events and no real easy way to make sense of any of it, okay? So next pain point, tracking URLs. So if you've ever spent time creating campaign tracking URLs, if you're doing any digital advertising, I'm sure most of you have done this, you're trying to tell Google Analytics the name of the campaign that this user came through from, the traffic source, what ad they clicked on, all that data. And if you have ever had more than one person doing that, you've probably run into the issue of inconsistencies. So when I started to dig into what kind of data we were capturing, I found that there were all sorts of inconsistencies and discrepancies, misspellings, people using different conventions like underscores or no underscore, sources. Is it Facebook, Instagram? Is it Facebook, Instagram general? Is it Facebook.com? Or is it Facebook? Or is it Facebook ad? I mean, this is just a tiny snapshot of what our old data looks like. And we had zero governance, zero process, no real way of getting everybody on board using the same naming conventions. And like Jenny mentioned before, it's really hard to do. It's really easy to write on a piece of paper or tell everyone in a meeting, this is how we're going to do it, but then to enforce that. And it's not like anyone's doing this on purpose. It's human error. So we realized that we had several problems: too many websites, too many events, no governance around our UTM tracking parameters. But the bigger problem wasn't just how we had implemented Google Analytics, okay? That's what we've kind of talked about so far. The bigger problem was the core philosophy and the understanding of why we do digital marketing in the first place and why we capture data in the first place. So for years, I've had clients come to me and say, hey, how many hits did my website get? And I'd say, well, it got this many. They'd be like, okay, that's great. And if it went up, that was even better. And if it went down, they were freaked out. Well, why did our page views go down? And that was the conversation. There was no real meaningful tie between the data we were capturing from our users on our digital properties and the marketing goals we had in place. So the web was looked at as kind of this tack-on thing, and all anyone cared about was traffic and unique page views and average time on page, and oh, the bounce rate went down. We have no idea why, but that's really important, and we should spend hours trying to figure out why the bounce rate went down. I'm not saying these things are never important, absolutely not. But if this is all you're doing in Google Analytics, you're really not getting all the benefit you can get out of it. And we had been in this world for so long, we were kind of just used to it. And we're like, well, yeah, you go look at the page views. How many page views did you get? So we're nearing the end of part one, but I just want to summarize again. We have 19 websites. We capture millions of events. We have no real KPIs. We have no real measurement strategy. We have no UTM governance, no UTM consistency. And this became abundantly clear to me about a year ago. I had known about it for quite some time, but a year ago I stepped into this new role. We had some new directors join our team. We had a new director of brand strategy and digital marketing, and they came from e-commerce worlds, and they kind of were asking me all these questions, saying, well, what are we doing about this? And all of a sudden, there's all this new momentum to start doing more. UW Health as an organization wanted to start doing more. We wanted to be more digital. We wanted to be more forward thinking. We didn't want to be like most healthcare organizations that are behind a decade when it comes to digital maturity. So, time for a change. And to start this change, I knew we needed a few things. I knew we needed to get our house in order from a data perspective, but I knew we also needed an overhaul on some of those websites. So we're getting into part two here. And really what we're going to talk about now is, from all that pain I just mentioned, what are we doing to address that pain? What are we doing to make those changes? And how are we laying a foundation? Where is it taking us? Because again, this work never stops. We're never done. We can only get better. So what needs to change? We need a new website. That's happening right now. As of this very moment, I've got an army of developers working their butts off to build a new digital platform that will address many issues. We're not going to talk a lot about that, but just want to throw that out there, that I'd be remiss to mention that all of this is not for nothing, but without that new platform to drive our traffic to, we'd be very limited in what we could do moving forward. We need a new measurement strategy, we need UTM governance, and we need clean, actionable, meaningful data. So step one, Google Analytics audit. We found this group of experts. They're in St. Louis. You might have heard of them. They're called Anvil Analytics and Insights. And I called Jenny up and said, help, please help. We need help. And I had heard Jenny speak at a conference last year. She addressed a lot of the things that we were going through, a lot of the pain that we had experienced. And so I really wanted to see what they could find if they looked under the hood of our Google Analytics. And I was thinking it wouldn't be that bad, but it's pretty bad. Okay, everything I mentioned before, that was really the highlights, but there were a lot of other things they found that we won't go into today because we don't have the time. But folks, I highly recommend, if you have not done an audit of your Google Analytics implementation, hire someone to do it. Get a third party in who's objective, who's unbiased, who will just come in and look at it and tell you what you're doing wrong. Chances are you're doing something wrong, and that's okay. None of us, a lot of us, if we're marketers, we're wearing 37 different hats. We don't have time to be experts in everything. So finding a team who does this all day, every day, 365 days a year to come in and audit your data, I highly recommend. Worth every penny. So Anvil comes in, they look under the hood, and their first recommendation is, you know what? You need to move to a single analytics profile. And I want to there's a caveat here. I mentioned we have 19 websites. We didn't move all of them into a single profile, but we moved many of them into a single profile. What that means is that when users hit, one website or another, all that traffic is getting captured, all those sessions is getting captured into the same bucket of data as a single session. And what it means is that we can follow our users around as they move between sites. So I mentioned, I showed you this slide before, as our users are bouncing back and forth from uwhealth.org to the coronavirus microsite, and then over to careers to apply for a job, and then over to MyChart to schedule an appointment, and back to uwhealth.org to read some health information or find a doctor, we've never had visibility into that journey. But now, with a single profile, and with all of these subdomains going into the same profile, we get a linear journey where we can say, a user started on uwhealth.org. They navigated to the coronavirus microsite to learn about COVID guidelines. They discovered that, yes, we are seeing patients right now, and it is safe for you to come in. And they go to MyChart, they schedule an appointment, and they go back to uwhealth.org maybe to learn some more information. And this is just a sample, but this is the data we need. These are the insights we want. We want to know what our patients are doing and how we can optimize that journey. So I just can't really emphasize enough what a significant paradigm shift this has been for us. It definitely comes with a learning curve, because if you're used to looking at all your websites as this standalone siloed property, it gets a little different when you start to lump them all together. But now it's not about the website, okay? The website is just, it's just a foundation for an experience to take place. The domain that your user is on, I don't mean to say it doesn't matter, but what matters more is the journey that they're on. So being able to highlight that journey is vital, in my opinion. We haven't talked a lot about profiles, but along with this one analytics profile, we set up several strategic views. I'm sorry, we haven't talked a lot about views in Google Analytics. So, in the old world, we had all these profiles for all these websites, and each one of them had tons of views, and there was no strategy around which views we had. So the recommendation was, hey, you need these 4 views. You need an unfiltered view where all the raw data comes in, and we're going to leave it alone, okay? That way, if anything ever goes wrong, we've just got that raw one we can go look at. You need a testing view so that when we want to make tests, when we want to make changes, we can play around in there kind of like a sandbox, but it's not going to affect your reporting view, which is where we do the majority of our work when we go in to get insights and look at the data. We're using that reporting view. And then lastly, the e-commerce view for more transactional type reporting. So this is what we have today, what we've actually set up in production on our new profile, where we're getting all this data funneling in from multiple websites into a single profile with these specific views. So moving on, you remember we talked about events, millions of events, no strategy, just a nightmare to go through. I want to quickly touch on the old way that we tracked events, which was a giant JavaScript file where we were literally writing jQuery functions to capture all those clicks and then fire off, okay, this is a user activity, top link on the homepage, header, whatever. I mean, guys, with thousands of these, okay, thousands. And let me just say that there's a better way to do this, and that is Google Tag Manager. So we had kind of dipped our toes in the water with Google Tag Manager a few years ago, but this was a chance to really break away from the big JavaScript file and to move into a more sophisticated way and an easier way, to be honest, of setting up these triggers and tags. Not going to spend a lot of time here, but just want to give a plug for GTM. It's not for the faint of heart. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but if you've got the wherewithal, and especially if you've got a partner who can help you get into it, I would highly recommend using it to its full advantage, because you can absolutely set up any custom event tracking that you want to do on your sites if you're using Google Tag Manager. But more important than how we were tracking the events, right? Google Tag Manager JavaScript file, was what we were tracking. Now, we talked earlier about how we didn't have a real measurement strategy. We didn't have a real healthy view of web analytics as it pertains to business goals. So one thing that Anvil did was they said, you know, guys, you're marketers, you know about the marketing funnel. Like this is marketing 101. We recommend you bucket your events by the funnel, which means we're going to look at events in only 3 categories. Okay. And to be clear, we had a lot of categories before that, all sorts of categories. Now we've really narrowed it down. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because I think this is really important. When people come to our website, we were looking at all sorts of data and we didn't really know what it meant. And we would kind of make up what it meant a lot of the times or find meaning where there wasn't really meaning. What this new implementation allows us to do is actually put meaning behind the data. So we want to know how many people are aware of UW Health. And we're using their behavior on our site to track that. So we're saying simply, if you're on our site for 30 seconds, you're aware of us. If you're using our site search, you're aware of us. And not surprisingly, most events fall into this category, like 90%, okay? Top of the funnel, it's big, it's broad, it's huge, right? Not a lot of action going on, not a lot of conversion. But this allows us to take all that mountain of events that were millions and really hone it down to say, okay, this is awareness. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, all right? This is not where like the strategy is going to take place. But this is where it gets interesting, no pun intended. The next bucket, the interest category, these are where the actions start to get really interesting. So people engaging with Find a Doctor, MyChart, they're printing web pages, they're watching videos, they're downloading guides. This is where we start to get into the meat of like, okay, these are folks that are probably already patients or likely about to become a patient. So we can start to really gain insight here. And then lastly, the meat. This is where the money is, right? The form fills. I'm requesting a consultation. I'm calling the clinic, or I'm sharing this content that you've written on my social feed. So we're not limited to these. One I want to point out that's not here right now that I was just thinking through because this is all so fresh to us. This all just went live in the last couple months. But on our career site, you know, I want to add applied for a job, right? We've got some work to do there with the platform that our career site is on, but that's one of the ones I'm looking forward to adding. And we can do that now with this new platform where we have the foundation to start to track those really meaningful actions and report them back to our business stakeholders. So again, I just really want to reiterate, only measure what you need to measure and only measure what matters. We were measuring everything before. You don't need to measure everything, right? You don't measure every square inch of your house. You measure the wall where you're going to put the couch because it's meaningful. It matters. You measure the wall in your master bedroom so you know if you can fit a king or a queen. But you don't measure the middle of the banister on the staircase just for the heck of it so you have that data point. It's not meaningful. So only measure what matters, only measure what's meaningful, only measure what ties back to your business goals. That was a hard one for me to swallow because as a data geek, I'm like, no, more data. Give me all the data. I want all the data points just in case I ever need to go back and look up this one crazy thing. Trust me, I've never done it. I've been saying that for years. I've never done it. So only measure what matters, okay? UTM Governance. So we talked about how we had a lot of people who, through no fault of their own, were just creating tracking parameters that were inconsistent and had typos and misspellings. So again, our friends at Anvil built this really awesome tracking URL builder. I'm really excited about this tool. I don't want to undermine the complexity underneath the hood, but for the end user, it's really simple. It's just a form that we fill out, and it abstracts away all the kind of the messiness of thinking through all your ad types and creative dimensions and traffic sources, and it puts it into a nice, easy to use form where we can simply say, yep, here's my campaign, I'm using these tactics, here's the ad content, whatever, and outspits a nice, clean tracking URL. And there's a lot of validation under the hood to make sure that mistakes are caught and handled. And it's pretty cool. So this doesn't fix everything. I want to be clear. This fixes a lot, but you still need to have kind of policies and procedures in place for how you name campaigns, right? You're still kind of in charge of the data you put into this. So a tool like this is very helpful only when it's coupled with the processes to make sure that those that are using the tool also understand how they should be naming campaigns and things like that. So this was just, I can't tell you how excited I was the day I got the link to this. It's something we've wanted for a long time. So really excited. So, let's summarize. We moved to a single Google Analytics profile, okay, for all of our websites, or sorry, all of our subdomains of uwhealth.org. We matched our event strategy with our measurement strategy, meaning we're not just tracking everything under the sun, we're just tracking the things that matter, what we want to measure. We want to measure awareness and interest and action. So that's what we're tracking. And we put in place UTM Governance so that the data that we're getting from our paid campaigns that are using those tracking parameters are consistent and there's less mess. So what's next? Why do we do all that? Okay, we're not, like I said before, we're not done. This is just the beginning. So, the tagline for this conference or for this presentation is building the foundation for the future. And that's really what this is. This is just step one, okay? And this is really only addressing our websites. Our websites bring in a lot of data along with our advertising platforms, but that's not all the data. So the way I look at this is we're building this foundation, we're getting the data clean, we're putting the processes and systems in place so that we can do more. And what we're looking to do in the next year, just to give you a sneak peek, is we're looking to stand up CRM for the first time at UW Health. We've been wanting to do this for years, and it's just been one of those mountains we can't quite climb for one reason or another. But there's finally, the stars have aligned, and there's a lot of buy-in and a lot of people outside of marketing, in IS, in revenue cycle, and in strategy are saying, we need CRM. Why don't we have CRM? So no contracts have been signed, but likely that'll be Salesforce. And along with that, we'll be able to bring along even more data. So we're looking to bring in all of our data from Epic, which is our electronic health record system that has all the information about appointments that have been scheduled and claims data to do, what's the word I'm looking for? Contribution margins, find out, how much money did we make off that click, that type of thing. Being able to pull all that data together along with this foundation that we've laid so that we're mapping those user journeys that we talked about between our different web properties. And then ultimately, once they get into our health system and start interacting with us through the electronic health record, we're able to pull that together and get even more insights. And I threw Invoca up here. We're looking at them right now. They've got some really fascinating call tracking technology that can actually help you fire conversion pixels back to your ad platform based on whether or not the conversation included things like, I'd like to schedule an appointment. So they're actually using like voice analysis. It's really crazy stuff. So this is kind of what we're looking for next year and kind of the next phase of our marketing maturity, of our data maturity model, getting all that together. And then after that's kind of stood up and we've kind of gotten all the kinks worked out of that, we're ultimately looking to feed all this data into some type of business intelligence tool. I threw Power BI up here just because we're an Office 365 shop, so we've already got it. But whether that's Tableau or some other system, we know that there's a lot more data than just what we're getting in Google Analytics, right? There's a lot more data than just what we're getting from our digital ad platforms. And we need to be bringing it all into one house, putting it into some type of system where we can actually look at the full picture and start to do real business intelligence. And this is where it even gets outside of my department because we're starting to work with our enterprise analytics folks. We're looking to work with our data warehouse folks because we've got PhDs over there that are just brilliant, that are doing all sorts of crazy stuff right now. But none of it's so far been tied into marketing. So really excited for what's to come at UW Health, and really excited for the ways that we can start to marry the marketing, the digital marketing data, the web usage data, along with our data from people actually interacting within our own walls, to start to get those insights and ultimately just provide better experiences for our patients. That's what this is all about. We're doing all of this so that we can give our patients what they want, which is a smoother access to their doctor, better healthcare, easier, more efficient care. So that's it. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that maybe some of the examples I gave hit home with maybe where you're at. And maybe you're way farther along than we are, and I'd love to hear from you if you're already doing CRM and business intelligence and you did this 10 years ago. I would love to hear from you, because we're just eager and ready to kind of absorb experience and stories from others that are, have kind of paved the way ahead of us. And if you're not where we are, if you're kind of where I was a year ago and you're in that like world of pain, reach out. I'd love to talk you through kind of more details. There's a lot of information I left out, obviously, for the sake of time. So yeah, and I think we're going to go do some Q&A now, Jenny. So feel free to ask any questions, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and stop your sharing. Let's see if you can share your video now for the Q&A portion.
It still says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Zoom. It is not playing nicely with us today. They probably pushed an update just last night that's changing all of this. Well, here, I will go ahead and share.
Should I leave and rejoin, Jenny?
Why don't we try that real quick? Yeah, let's give it a shot.
All right,
we have a couple of minutes.
I'll be right back.
Awesome, cool. Perfect. So while he's leaving and rejoining, I, again, just want to give kudos to the entire University of Wisconsin Health team on the analytics and marketing side. It's been really cool watching them as an organization work together. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the Q&A with them, because they are pulling together a couple of different teams. And as I think all of you know, whenever you pull together disparate teams within your organization to accomplish a goal together, it can get really messy and difficult. And here he is. Perfect. Awesome. What do you think, Noah? Is your video going to work this time? We'll give him a minute. But whenever you pull together disparate teams within your organization to accomplish a singular goal, and each team really has different objectives within that goal, it can be really difficult politically to make it happen. So that's one of the things I'm going to chat about with Noah.
Sorry, it's giving me the same message.
Same message? That's okay. I was chatting because we've been doing webinars often, like every 2 weeks. And so Zoom must have pushed an update over the last couple of days, which is technology for you. So what I'm going to actually do is go ahead and just jump directly into questions. So one thing that I was sharing whenever you were dialing back in, Noah, is how impressed I have been at watching the disparate teams within your organization work together for a singular goal of driving measurement. I know you're on the analytics team, the marketing team, there's people within the tech team all working together. What do you think has been I don't use the word secret, but the path to success that has driven this collaboration? Because we've really watched a lot of organizations try to do this, but the secondary motives for each of those teams many times gets in the way of them working together and collaborating in a healthy fashion. So how has it worked for you guys?
I think that's a great question. So the thing that changed for us was a change in leadership, and having leaders that understand the value of not just data, but understand the value of measuring the right things, and also investing in the people and technology and processes to make it all happen. Most of the people on my team have been here for over a decade, and we've all wanted the same thing, but it wasn't until kind of a changing of the guard where all of a sudden it wasn't like we were just suddenly given permission. We started being pushed. It went from kind of having this resistance to having leaders that were pushing us, saying, why aren't we doing this? Which is great. It's like, well, it wasn't even worth talking about why we weren't doing it. It's like, well, let's just go do it. That being said, and I don't want people to be discouraged and be like, oh, well, my VP will never go for that. It's more like a lot of it is being an evangelist and a champion for why you need to be doing this work, and helping people that maybe have more of a traditional marketing bent, or they're stuck maybe in like the late 90s healthcare model, helping them understand how consumerism is changing the landscape and helping them translate that. Well, find the person who's best at explaining it, and take that person and have them really try and sell it upwards, and show meaningful tests of change, like show quick wins. Say, hey, we ran this campaign and we got X amount of, referrals or whatever it is, and start to, start small.
I love that. I think the quick wins is really key. And that's something that's been really cool watching you guys work, is you're definitely focused on sprints and really getting those quick wins along the way. And I'm sure that's fostered a lot of buy-in within your organization. So
absolutely.
Awesome. We actually, go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you.
Cool. We actually had an audience submitted question that said, maybe you'll be answering this, but from that funnel where you were actually talking about, the three different awareness funnels, how were you actually using that information to implement tactics? So for example, how is knowing the number of people that are aware or interested being used, especially with analytics being so anonymous?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Well, we've only had that data for a little over a month. So I just want to be clear that this presentation is kind of hitting right in the thick of all this work. So the audit actually was completed over the summer.
Yeah.
This new analytics profile just went live. And I'm just going to be totally transparent. We haven't done much with the data yet because my entire team is trying to launch a website at the end of next month. So I don't mean to steer away from the question, but just to be transparent, we haven't done a lot with it yet. But thinking through it, I think one of the things that we're really trying to measure as a health system, we launched a new brand at the beginning of the year, and a significant amount of work, over a year's worth of work, went into developing this new brand, a new brand identity, a lot of investment. And I look at those awareness events as a reflection of how well our brand campaigns are doing, because we're doing a lot of awareness building right now, where we're just kind of, trying to put our brand in front of people's faces. We want consumers, when they think about who provides the best healthcare in Wisconsin, we want UW Health to be the one they come up with, so that when they then have that surgery they need, they want to come to us. And so I see that as a direct correlation, the being able to track a positive increase over time of that awareness could be correlated with a positive impact on our brand awareness as we're kind of investing money. That's a little harder to track when you're at that top of the funnel, or harder to come up with a concrete, ROI, but that's how I would look at that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it'll be really fun to have you come talk next year after your new website is launched, and you have a little bit of time to sit with these new measurement strategies to be able to implement tactics, because I have a feeling you guys are going to get really granular and sophisticated with it. So
yeah, absolutely,
it'll be fun. Awesome. Have you ever considered an analytics platform other than Google Analytics?
Yes, we have. I think that right now, Google Analytics is free and quite capable. But that's not to say that we wouldn't love to not be, and this isn't a knock on Google as a company, but I think anytime you're using a free product, you have to ask the question of, is my data being used for any other purposes? And I don't mean to suggest that it is, but I think that if we could own our data 100%, I would love that. And I would think that would be a worthy endeavor. So whether that's, some type of homegrown solution, we have the capability of kind of sending all this data into an enterprise data lake that we have in house. It's just one of those things that would probably be a year-long implementation. And so that's probably not what we're going to go after right now. I think we need to first prove to the organization that we can take a free product like Google Analytics and use it to drive change and show its value. And then and only then would it make sense to say, okay, we're 5 years into this, we've grown in maturity, and now we want to take the next step, and we want to own our data. We want to kind of back away from Google Analytics.
Yeah, Brett Lohmeyer, who's the director of decision science at Anvil, really considers Google Analytics as sort of like a very practical family sedan, right? Like it works really well right out of the box. And any of those other solutions that you have to implement manually are sort of like getting a sports car in a box in pieces. So it's going to work much better from a performance perspective, but you have to build it yourself, and it can take a really long time. So it's interesting. The vast majority of people in the healthcare space that we talk to are all on Google Analytics. So it'll be interesting, like you guys are going to do over the next couple of years to see what the transition looks like. Let's talk a little bit more about what CRM you're currently using.
Yeah, so we have this really awesome CRM. It's called Not a CRM. That wasn't very funny. We're not using a CRM at all. We have, for anyone in healthcare, it's a heavy lift because you can't just go spin up a HubSpot account, right?
Yep.
There's all this patient data. And all the data is sensitive. It's the kind of stuff that people get weirded out about when they find out that you're using all that data to track what they're doing. And so we have to be really careful about it. So implementing a system that is HIPAA compliant is not only difficult from an operational perspective, it's also very expensive. And up until recently, there has not been appetite to invest the resources. And I think, again, it was really because the value hadn't really been realized at the time. And now that we're trying to do sophisticated marketing, doing sophisticated marketing without CRM is really hard. So that's on the docket for 2021. And I'm fairly confident it's going to happen because this time around, we've got many of our kind of C-suite executives on board saying, yeah, we need to do this. And usually when that's the case, it happens. So I think by this time next year, we'll be in the beginning stages of implementation, I hope.
Very cool. Very cool. How are you connecting the KPIs you're measuring on the web to clinical outcomes?
Yeah, that's really tricky. As it stands right now, the way we have to do that is, well, let me just give an example. We, let's say we're running a liver transplant campaign, and we take, 50 form fills in for that campaign of people requesting to be on our list for receiving a new liver. That's kind of the first step in those campaigns, is getting people to sign up for your list. And we'll then basically manually take that data, we'll put it in a spreadsheet, and then it takes about a year to a year and a half to even find out, one, if that person got a liver, and two, if we performed the transplant surgery. And so we have to wait and then get reports back from our data team, and then manually try and match up the names to see if, John Doe actually got a liver transplant. And then we do some kind of fuzzy math to see if we can calculate some type of ROI, and it's 18 months later. So all that to say, we're not very effectively measuring any of our web KPIs against any clinical outcomes, and that's what we desperately need that CRM for. We really need to be able to, in real time or near real time, take our EHR data, our claims data that is tracking all those outcomes and mapping it back to interactions with our digital properties.
Yeah. Very cool. Let's see. If you had to give advice to someone starting at the very beginning of this process, what would you recommend they aim to achieve in the short term? Say they're thinking about, between now and the end of the year, what do you think is realistic for them to try to hold themselves accountable to accomplish in that short period of time?
Figure out what you want to measure. Like really sit down and find out what's important to the organization. What does your boss and your boss's boss and their boss, what are they trying to achieve? Take those strategic goals and then start to translate them into meaningful interactions on your digital properties and the campaigns that you're running. From there, you're going to move a lot quicker when you move into the step of, like, I would highly recommend anyone doing an audit of not just Google Analytics, but any of their data practices for digital marketing. Before you step into those audits, it's really helpful to have done that homework and build a roadmap. Decide if it was now to the end of the year, figure out what 2021 is going to look like. You're going to do your audit, then what? You're going to implement the recommendations from the audit, great, then what? And so really start to build out that process, plan a few campaigns around the new data platform that you're going to have so that you can start to get those insights. And I should mention, we have about 12 that are going live over the next several weeks. So I think, hopefully these new measurement strategies are really going to start to come to life. And so, with that, I would just say, plan to don't just make the changes and then kind of wipe your hands, but make the changes and then start to test them. Because you may find that, your original ideas weren't necessarily true, or you need to, tweak it a little bit, and that's okay.
I love it. Very, very solid advice. Last question before we do a quick break before our next session are there any training resources you'd recommend for someone in a marketing role that wants to become more analytics savvy?
I once heard a wise woman say that everyone should have their Google Analytics certification. And I think that's absolutely true. Getting certified isn't a magic bullet, but it will force you to get into the details of Google Analytics and not just be what I think most of us are, which is kind of a passive user. It's like we go in and we look at page views and then we're kind of like, okay. But really getting into the weeds and becoming certified, it's not easy, and it requires you to do your homework, but you will be better for it and you will understand kind of the depths, and it will give you a healthy appreciation for the data that you are capturing. You'll start to ask questions about, well, why are we doing it that way? I would say start there.
I love it. And clearly I recommend the same. Actually, every single person at Anvil is Google Analytics certified, even if they don't do anything with Google Analytics, the platform itself. So like our design and UX team, fully certified. Even our receptionist is fully certified. We want everybody to understand data. So great recommendation for anybody on your team to get certified, just to make sure you're all speaking the same language whenever you talk about terminology and start digging into specifics. So, well, Noah, thank you. I'm so sorry about the problem with the video. Everybody would have really benefited from seeing your smiling, beautiful face this morning, but the content was outstanding. So thank you so much. For everyone else, we're going to take just a couple-minute break. We're going to get started at top of the hour at 10 a.m. Central. And we have Bree Pardo with us from Geisinger doing a kind of similar presentation as far as their journey and process, but their journey has been very different from University of Wisconsin Health's. Some similarities, but she'll be talking about a couple of different things. So be sure to tune in. We'll see you back here in about 5 minutes.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.